So my name's Spencer Hollowell. I'll be presenting on behalf of my group, and we were focused on the transportation sector and the resiliency on how transportation feeds Logan Airport in particular. So a little bit of an overview of what I'll be going over today. First, I'll be talking about the importance of transportation to Massport and Logan, identify some of the vulnerabilities of the transportation sector, identify the interdependencies between our group and the other groups. I'll look at the measures to increase resiliency through innovative designs, external incentivizing and partnerships, and governance model and emergency planning. And then we have a proposed budget that we conceptually came up with specifically for our group. So each day, Logan Airport handles about 12,000 employees, on average 90,000 passengers, 1,000 flights, and 670 tons of cargo. The most important thing is Logan Airport is in the business of moving people and things. And without being able to get the people and things to Logan Airport, it's essentially useless. So if we look at the different ways that at least people get to Logan Airport, we have people driving in through tunnels, the Sumner Tunnel, the Ted Williams Tunnel, and through Route 1A coming in from the north, compromises a large percentage of the people coming into Logan Airport every day. We also have the blue line and the silver lines feeding into Logan Airport, and of course the Massport Express delivers a lot of people here. I'd also like to point out that a lot of the jet fuel that services Logan Airport, almost all the jet fuel, comes in via ship and unloads in terminals up the Chelsea River. And also almost 100% of Boston's road salt that treats the roads in the winter times also comes in via this waterway and unloads up the Chelsea River. So we wanted to look at the vulnerability of these transportation, different types of transportation as it pertained to hurricane surge and hurricane flooding. So Massport covers over 3,000 acres total. And if we look at Category 1 hurricane, the green represents the 22% of the total area of Massport-owned land is inundated just from this hurricane surge. If we look at a Category 2 hurricane, that jumps up to 74% of the total land total. So there's a huge difference between a Category 1 hurricane and a Category 2 hurricane. And if we look at a Category 3 hurricane, while it's less likely to hit the region, 83% of the total land is inundated. So not too much of a change between a Category 2 and a Category 3. And of course, a very, very worst case scenario, Category 4 hurricane, 86% of the land is inundated. And if you look at Logan Airport in general, especially from if we look at the Category 2 hurricane, Logan Airport almost becomes an island. The entire infill land that Logan Airport sits on is covered during the hurricane surge from Category 2. If we zoom in on Logan Airport in general and highlight the different transportation routes that are feeding into Logan Airport, we can see that even during a Category 1 hurricane, those highlighted areas are covered. So we have the Ted Williams Tunnel is covered in blue here where the entranceway goes into the tunnel. The blue lines in the Sumner Tunnel are both covered. We also have the Chelsea Street Bridge that is inundated during a Category 1 hurricane, as well as parts of Route 1A from the north are going to be covered during a Category 1 hurricane. So this is a large chunk of the total percentage of the transportation that feeds into Logan Airport is covered even in Category 1 surge. So that's a very important thing to highlight here. Some other vulnerabilities beyond just water. So if we can deal with water coming into the airport, we can get the water out by pumping it very easily. But things that are difficult to take into consideration are the things that come in along with the water. So we have things like debris in this case. You have logs, construction debris, any type of destruction that the water flows along with is going to be deposited on that land once the water recedes. And it takes people and it takes resources and equipment and machinery in order to remove that debris. In the bottom right, this is a picture from Hurricane Sandy in which the surge swept up sand from tidal barriers and deposited on the land. So this is a huge amount of sand right here. And currently, I don't think Logan Airport is equipped to remove this amount of sand. We don't know if this amount of sand would actually be deposited. We don't know what the barrier islands and things like that out in the harbor would actually do. But it is another threat that not just hurricane water is a problem for Logan Airport. And then thirdly, if we look at the buildings within Logan Airport, this is a building not specifically at Logan Airport, but it shows that it's currently protected using flood barriers. And if we use flood barriers to surround individual buildings, what we do is we isolate them from each other, and they end up becoming little islands. And one of the problems is you can't have people travel between the buildings. So say you need emergency workers to get from one building to another one, their specific buildings may be dry, but they can't swim between the next building, so they actually need a way to be transported throughout the airport. Whether or not you use the flood barriers to create channels between different buildings, or another creative way to shuttle people between the buildings, that's up for discussion. So external effects from hurricane storm surge. As I said before, a Category 1 hurricane only has 60-mile-per-hour winds, but it causes over 6.5 feet of storm surge above the ground level. So even if Logan Airport was able to create a barrier on their side of the blue line, say, if you look at downtown Boston, the aquarium stop is going to be fully inundated. So not only does Logan Airport have to rely on their own resiliency efforts, they have to rely on external resiliency efforts in order to make sure that people are able to still get into this airport. Also, the Meridian Street Bridge, during a Category 1 hurricane, this would be flooded. The reason why that's important is because all of the fuel and all of the road salt have to pass underneath that bridge. If some of the equipment in this bridge was temporarily taken out of service, this is a bastille bridge, it would no longer be able to raise up. Fuel wouldn't be able to enter the Chelsea River, so Logan Airport wouldn't be able to rely on that fuel. So that's another very important piece of external transportation that is very important to Logan Airport, in which they have no control over. So a few of the cascading interdependencies that are evident from past exposure to natural hazards. One in particular is an Indian blackout of 2012, in which a large portion of the power grid failed. And as you can see here, it causes a huge amount of gridlock. And as we know from the past few days, this gridlock can compound and essentially cripple the entire city. So if the power sector goes down, then transportation, you can expect that to be snarled up as well. We also have things like air traffic. If Logan Airport itself has delays in flights and canceled flights, that's going to have some cascading effects for flights in other airports as well around the region. We also looked at other interdependencies. Obviously, the transportation sector is heavily reliant on the fuel sector because without fuel cars and equipment and things like that, the transportation sector is crippled. The T in particular needs electricity to run. Traffic signals need electricity to run. Train switches need electricity to run. That's also very important for the transportation sector. And also those two sectors are reliant on transportation as well. Fuel needs to be transported to locations so that it can be offloaded and actually utilized by other agencies and things like that. So they rely on transportation also to keep running. So we have this cyclic effect where if one system goes down, you have a cascading effect through all the other systems. So we looked at a few different interesting proactive designs that could possibly help some of the problems that I've outlined earlier. First is a lightweight and transportable composite dock. So currently the ferry unloads here at Logan Airport, and it unloads on pre-stressed concrete floating docks. The problem with that is they're sitting in salt water, and the steel can corrode. So they're not exactly the most sustainable solution. A composite dock like this, made out of fiberglass, not only is it impervious to salt water and corrosion, it's easily transportable. So this is a dock that's being towed by a pickup truck right here, and it can be moved anywhere that you need the dock. So if Logan Airport needed a dock, say, on the north side of the airport, they would be able to load it up on a truck, ship it over there, if they know that the floodwaters are going to be high enough where they'll need a dock to unload people or equipment. There are inflatable bubbles that can be put into a tunnel. These are currently being researched in New York subway systems. And the idea behind these is you have an inflatable bladder that takes up the entire channel or the entire tube, and it conforms to the shape of that tube. So not only can water not pass through it, but things like smoke, things like fire can't pass through this. So this can also be utilized for things like conduit tunnels. They can be used for places that people can't necessarily get to block off access to things like smoke and water. Things like that. One of the more interesting ideas that we had was using duck boats for transportation during a flooding event. So during a severe hurricane, you wouldn't expect the duck boats to be running. Not many tourists are going to be going out and touring the harbor. So we thought maybe we could utilize those duck boats because they're amphibious vehicles. If there was the crucial need to get people to and from different flooded areas within Logan Airport, or to and from areas that may not be flooded but have water in between them, these duck boats could be contracted to help move those people around. And lastly, we thought adaptive signage and direction technology. Instead of having stationary and static signs that point people where they should be going, in the case of an emergency, you can adapt that sign, if it's an electronic sign, to point people in different directions. You can change parking rules. You can help ease the flow of traffic in the case of an emergency by making that sign adaptive. So Massport is committed to resilience right now, but the challenge lies within its immediate support structure. So in particular, for the transportation, MassDOT and MBTA are really key stakeholders in helping keep Logan Airport resilient and running. And I think there needs to be incentivization by raising awareness through bilateral agreements between these three parties. So one bilateral agreement that we thought would be interesting would be if Logan traded snow removal for debris removal. So in the case of a hurricane that, say, deposited a lot of sand or a lot of debris on the runways, in which they may not be equipped to handle that, either MassDOT or MBTA could help lend some of that equipment to remove that debris from the runways. In exchange, during a severe snow event, Logan Airport is very well equipped to deal with snow removal, so maybe they would be able to lend a little bit of their capacity for snow removal to the MBTA or to the MassDOT. Also, the mobile docks for sustained ferry service. We thought if Logan Airport helped front the cost for some of those floatable composite docks and lent them to the MBTA so they could run for the next 50 or 100 years without having to worry about replacing those docks, then they would have the right to move those docks wherever they wanted in the case of an emergency, because MBTA ferry systems will not be running in an emergency during a hurricane situation, whereas Logan Airport may have a need for those systems elsewhere. And also, since Massport is one of the leading edge experts in resiliency, we thought that definitely they will need to share their expertise with the MBTA, with MassDOT, to show the steps that they've been taking in order to educate them, and also to start that dialogue between the entities. And also some of the incentives. There are NSF grants for research for decision frameworks, multi-hazard resilience, sustainable buildings, and civil infrastructure systems. So our governance model, kind of planning ahead what you should do in case of an emergency. A framework needs to be established, and already has been established, to communicate between the different agencies, whether it be MBTA, Massport, MassDOT, City Hall, local emergency systems. If the duck boat idea was to be used, they should be staged at Massport. They should be fully crewed and ready to go if they need to be people ferried across. An idea, if you have temporary flood barrier walls, the aqua fence idea is a proprietary removable flood barrier. It should be erected around critical and vulnerable infrastructure, and a plan should be in place to get people to and from that infrastructure in case the flood barriers are holding back X number of feet of water. Massport loaner docks should be ready for MBTA to borrow in times of flooding, and underground and other vulnerable equipment should be relocated to higher ground. And to top this all off, we think that yearly drills and exercises should be practiced to make sure that everybody who has a key role in this preparedness is ready to do so in the case of an emergency. So it's not good to have all of these plans in place and only work it out every 5 years that a hurricane comes. This needs to be done often so that people are ready to do it in the time of emergency. So this is a conceptualized budget that we came up with, probably not as important for today's discussion. So I will conclude and say that regional disaster response and recovery and the recovery of Logan Airport is very important to the Boston area. Resilient transportation systems are crucial to the everyday function of Logan Airport, as well as disaster recovery. And we've offered some incentives, tools, and designs to creatively help improve the resilience of Logan. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thanks.